Do you think a nursing home is the safest place to grow old? I used to believe that too. I truly thought it would be a place where I could finally relax, get professional care, and live with less to worry about. But just weeks after moving in, I discovered the truth was very different from the promise. No one told me that once I stepped into that building, I'd slowly start losing the things that made me feel alive: my freedom, my choices, and eventually, my sense of self. My name is Walter. I'm 82 years old, and before moving into the nursing home, I lived alone in a little house on the edge of Austin, Texas. Every morning, I woke up around 8:30, made myself a bowl of oatmeal, brewed black coffee, and read the Austin American-Statesman. If the weather was nice, I'd walk out to the porch, tend to my rosemary bush, and hum old Willie Nelson tunes. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I realize those little routines were my freedom. The freedom to choose when to eat, when to rest, what to wear, or even when to sit in silence. In my own home, I still felt like me. Then I moved into the nursing home, and everything changed. Breakfast was served at 7:15, sharp, whether I was hungry or not. Lights out by 9 p.m., even if I was in the middle of a book. If I wanted fresh air, I needed an escort, and some days, no one was available. I remember my first morning there. I woke up, reached for my reading glasses, and sat up to start my routine. But something was off. The nightstand wasn't mine. The air smelled like disinfectant. My slippers were missing, and the book I had been reading left behind. That's when it hit me: I wasn't at home. I wasn't in charge anymore. According to research from the National Institute on Aging, losing control over daily routines is one of the leading causes of mental and emotional stress in older adults. We think we're being taken care of, but in reality, we're losing the freedom to care for ourselves. My roommate, Helen, used to be an English teacher. At home, she journaled every day and painted watercolor flowers. But here she told me, every time I try to write, a nurse knocks on the door for meds or meals. After a while, I just stopped. So let me ask you, if you're considering a nursing home, are you ready to give up those tiny freedoms? Because once they're gone, they don't come back easily, and the loss isn't loud. It's quiet, gradual, until one day, you look around and wonder whose life you're living. Feeling forgotten. Have you ever felt the world kept moving while you just stood still, waiting for someone to remember you? I didn't expect it. I thought my family would visit often, just like they promised. When I first moved into the nursing home, they were there every week. My daughter, Anna, would bring me homemade banana bread. My grandson, Jacob, used to sit beside me, showing me photos on his phone and telling me about school. For a while, it felt like nothing had changed. But then, life happened. The visits started slowing down. First, it was every other week, then once a month. Phone calls replaced hugs, text messages replaced smiles, and when the holidays came, plans kept falling through. Sorry, Dad, we're running late. Something came up with Jacob's basketball game. We'll come next weekend, I promise. Weekend after weekend, I found myself sitting in the community room, watching the front door, hoping. That's the part that hurts the most. Not anger, not blame. Just quiet disappointment that builds, slowly, like dust settling on a photo frame. I remember one Saturday evening, I sat in my room holding my phone. I stared at Anna's name. My thumb hovered over the call button. I wanted to hear her voice, but I didn't want to sound needy. I didn't want to interrupt her life just to remind her I still exist. So I put the phone down. That was the moment I realized I wasn't part of their daily life anymore. I was just a thought, something they remembered now and then. This isn't uncommon. Studies from the National Institute on Aging show that over 60% of nursing home residents feel socially isolated within the first 6 months. It's not because their families don't love them, it's because out of sight often becomes out of mind. And it's not just me. I've seen it in others too. Mr. Collins, across the hall, used to get visits every Sunday, then every other Sunday. Now, he mostly just stares at the window, hands folded, eyes tired. He once said to me, "I'm not even sure if it's Sunday anymore." When you're not physically present in someone's life, you slowly fade out of their rhythm. And when you're living in a nursing home, loneliness becomes a daily routine served quietly with your morning pills. So let me ask you, are you ready to feel forgotten, even by the people who love you? Because no matter how close your family is now, once you're no longer part of their everyday world, it's easier than you think to become invisible. Losing my sense of purpose. What gets you out of bed in the morning? For me, it used to be the little things. Watering the houseplants, grinding my own coffee beans, folding laundry while humming a tune. At first glance, none of it seemed that important. But now I understand those small routines were my purpose. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought I was just changing where I lived. I didn't realize I was also changing why I lived. In my home in Austin, I had reasons to move, to think, to care. I planned my own meals, paid the bills, even fixed a leaky sink last winter. There was a rhythm to life, and I was part of it. But here, inside these walls, that rhythm disappeared. Meals are brought to me. My bed is made by someone else. If I spill something, someone rushes in to clean it up. Helpful, sure, but over time, I stopped doing and started waiting. I remember a neighbor down the hall, Mr. Raymond. He was a retired carpenter, 84 years old, hands like oak, strong and steady. When he first arrived, he asked the staff if he could help with small repairs around the building. They said no for liability reasons. A week later, I passed by his room. He sat there, hands folded, staring at the blank wall. His hammer had been replaced by silence. One day, he said to me quietly, "If I'm not fixing something, who am I now?" That question stuck with me. Psychologists call it purpose deprivation. As we age, losing meaningful daily roles can trigger depression, cognitive decline, even physical weakness. It's not about how busy you are, it's about whether what you do still matters. Here, many residents fall into that same pattern. They wake, eat, nap, repeat, no decisions, no tasks, no ownership, just time, stretching endlessly. And the sad truth is, when your days have no purpose, they feel twice as long. So let me ask you, gently, if you were to move into a nursing home, what would still give your life meaning? Because it won't be the food, or the TV, or the daily routine. You'll have to fight for the things that make you feel alive. Declining health faster than expected. Have you ever felt your body aging faster than your heart is ready for? Before I moved into a nursing home, I wasn't doing too bad for an 82-year-old. I wasn't climbing mountains, but I was active. I walked to the grocery store twice a week. I did light stretches every morning. I cooked my meals and washed the dishes. It kept me going both physically and mentally. But once I settled into the nursing home, my routines faded, and so did my strength. At first, it felt like a break. Meals delivered to my room, no dishes to clean. If I needed anything, I pressed a button and someone came. Convenient, right? But that convenience came at a hidden cost. I stopped moving as much. I sat longer. My legs started to stiffen. One day, I realized that getting up from the couch took effort, real effort. And I thought, when did this happen? There's a woman here, Mrs. Evelyn, 81 years old, full of energy when she arrived. She used to walk laps around the courtyard every afternoon. "I'm not slowing down just because of a number," she'd say with a smile. But 3 months in, she was using a walker. By month 5, she was in a wheelchair. "I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months," she whispered to me one day. She's not wrong. Doctors call it disuse syndrome, a condition where the less you use your body, the faster it weakens. Muscles atrophy, joints stiffen, balance declines. Even short-term inactivity in the elderly can lead to long-term disability. And in nursing homes where everything is designed to minimize effort, it's easy to fall into that trap. The truth is, when everything is done for you, you slowly stop doing for yourself. I wish someone had told me that taking it easy could cost me my independence. I would have kept walking, even when I didn't feel like it. I would have stretched a little longer, stood up a little more, refused the wheelchair when I still had the strength. So let me ask you, if you move into a nursing home, will you still have the will to keep your body moving when the system makes it so easy to stop? Because once your strength slips away, getting it back isn't just hard, it can be impossible. Loss of privacy and dignity. What happens when you're no longer allowed to close the door to your own life? That's what it felt like when I moved into the nursing home. At home, I had a room that was mine, a bathroom I could use when I wanted. I could sit in silence if I needed to, play old jazz records on Sunday afternoons, or just take a long shower without asking anyone. In here, privacy becomes a luxury. From day one, staff came in and out of my room, sometimes knocking, sometimes not. My blood pressure was checked while I was still half asleep. Lights were turned off for quiet hours, even if I wasn't ready for bed. And personal moments like changing clothes or using the bathroom suddenly required help. That was the hardest part. Needing help isn't what hurt. It was losing the choice to decide when and how I wanted that help. One morning, I stood at the mirror with a towel wrapped around me, waiting for someone to assist me into the shower. I waited 20 minutes, then 30. Eventually, I sat back down on the edge of the bed, still half dressed, feeling exposed, not physically, emotionally. And then there's the roommate situation. Not everyone gets a private room. I share mine with Mr. Hal. He's kind, but he snores loudly and talks in his sleep. Some nights, I wake up disoriented, forgetting where I am. Other residents aren't as lucky. Some get paired with people who scream, refuse to bathe, or suffer from severe dementia. But no matter who it is, you're forced to share your most vulnerable moments with a stranger. There's something sacred about personal space, about closing a door and knowing you won't be interrupted. That space is where you process life, grief, memory. And when you lose it, you start to feel like just another number on someone's clipboard. A 2020 study from the Journal of Aging Studies found that loss of autonomy and privacy are two of the top contributors to emotional withdrawal in long-term care residents. When you're constantly being monitored, told what time to eat, when to sleep, even what to wear, it chips away at your dignity. So let me ask you, are you prepared to give up the privacy and control you've had your entire life? Because in a nursing home, personal space is no longer a guarantee. It's a privilege. And once it's gone, the feeling of being you slowly fades too. Harder to leave than you think. Do you think moving into a nursing home is a decision you can undo? I thought so too. When I first came here, I told myself it was temporary. Just try it out. I said, if it doesn't feel right, I'll go back home. It seemed logical, like renting a place, not buying it. But no one tells you what happens after you move in. At first, my house back in Austin was still there, but slowly, things changed. My daughter started sorting through my stuff, selling some of it, giving other things away. She meant well. "You won't need this anymore." "Dad," she said, smiling. They even talked about renting the place to cover part of my care. I didn't say anything. I still believed I could leave whenever I wanted. But by month 3, I wasn't so sure anymore. I had stopped cooking, cleaning, walking upstairs. My legs weren't as strong. I felt slower, less steady. The very help I thought would protect me had softened me more than I realized. And when I finally told my family I wanted to go back home, the hesitation in their eyes said it all. "Are you sure?" "Dad, what if you fall again? Maybe it's safer here. You have help 24/7. We just want what's best for you." What they meant was, "You've already adjusted, so stay where it's easier." But easier isn't always better. And by then, my home no longer felt like an option. Utilities were off. My things were gone. The independence I once had, not just rusty, almost lost. I've met others here with the same story. They came thinking it was a short stay, but then their house got sold. Their savings were eaten up by care costs. Their bodies weakened, their confidence eroded, and suddenly, the door they thought they could walk out of was no longer open. That's what no one tells you. Moving into a nursing home feels reversible, but in most cases, it's not. So I ask you, with all the honesty I can offer, are you prepared for the possibility that once you go in, you may never go back? Because once the support system shifts, the logistics change, and your body adapts to being helped, not helping itself. Leaving becomes a mountain, not a doorway. Letting go of who you were and why that hurts the most. What happens when you're still alive, but no longer feel like yourself? Of all the changes I've gone through since moving into a nursing home, this one has been the most painful. More than losing my routines, more than the silence in my room, even more than the physical decline. It's the feeling that I'm no longer me. Back home, I was Walter, the guy who fixed neighbors' fences, who people call when they needed a second opinion on plumbing. The man who hosted Sunday cookouts and carved the turkey every Thanksgiving. People looked at me with respect, with familiarity. Here I'm just room 17B, or Mr. Walter. Blood pressure at 10/0, and over time, I started believing that version. No one meant to erase me, but when you're no longer in your community, when your calendar isn't yours, when your name is on a chart instead of on a mailbox, you begin to forget who you used to be. And that loss doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, quiet. One day you skip shaving, the next, you stop mentioning your old hobbies because no one asks. And soon, you stop recognizing the person in the mirror. I remember looking at an old photo of myself laughing, wearing a ridiculous holiday sweater. I barely recognized that man. Not because of the wrinkles or gray hair, but because that man had something in his eyes: purpose, confidence, identity. And I wondered, where did he go? Psychologists call this identity erosion, when prolonged lack of choice and agency leads older adults to disconnect from their own self-image. It's not just emotional, it affects how we move, speak, engage, and it's one of the quietest but most dangerous effects of institutional life. Because once you stop feeling like you, it's easy to stop fighting for yourself. So here's what I want to say, especially if you're still living in your own home. Protect your identity with everything you've got. Keep doing the things that make you you. Wear the sweater, play the old music, tell the story one more time. Even if your grandkids roll their eye, because it matters. And if you're thinking of moving into a facility, make sure it's one that really sees you as a person, not just a patient. You are more than your room number. You are still the whole, valuable, irreplaceable person you've always been. And you deserve to be treated that way until the very end. I don't regret growing old. Growing old, in many ways, is a privilege. Not everyone gets to do it. I've laughed, loved, raised a family, and seen things most people only read about in history books. But I do regret one thing. I regret believing a nursing home was my only option. When I moved in, I expected comfort, safety, a better quality of life. What I didn't expect was how much I would lose in the process: my independence, my purpose, my dignity, and slowly, my sense of self. That's not to say nursing homes are bad. Some people genuinely need full-time care, and in those cases, they can be life-saving. But if you're still capable, still active, still holding on to your routines, then don't give up those freedoms too easily. Ask more questions, explore alternatives, consider in-home care, community programs, assisted living, or even shared housing with a friend. There are more options out there than most of us realize. Because once you move in, life will never be the same. I say this not to scare you, but to help you choose with eyes open, not from fear or pressure. If I could go back, I would have fought harder to stay in my home. I would have asked more questions, spoken up sooner, and trusted that my comfort should never cost me my identity. So now I turn to you. Is this really what's best for you, or just what seems easiest right now? Because the life you have, your routines, your choices, your voice is still worth protecting. And if this message helped you today, pass it on. You never know whose freedom you might help preserve just by sharing the truth.